This is Madia-as Digdigan Buenaflor, extending an invitation to each and every one of you everywhere. As my way of commemorating the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, I will read and serialize my novel, The Blood of Three, starting on Tuesday, August 27, and continuing episodes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Follow the drama on my YouTube channel. May we forever exhale and inhale love and peace. Choosing a box filled with bullets, he carefully and very quietly lifted it and put it down right at one end of the door. He carried another box with its unbelievable weight and placed it at the end of the other door, hoping that the weight of the boxes, which he could not believe he was able to lift, would not budge when the doors were pushed to the sides. To reinforce his blockade, he positioned two rifles as braces between the floor and the doors. Assured that the armory was not secured for the guerrillas, Mr. Miura exited the catacomb and sped through the tunnel with the oil lamp in hand. Colonel Holt and his men had now reached the designated point where the men will deploy to their respective assigned area. At exactly 2400 hour, they would stage their attack. The fire and enthusiasm generated by the Colonel's Holt's speech back at the camp was clearly noticeable on the faces of the men, but deep within, not discernible to anyone, was that nagging anxiety when death may be near at hand. The Colonel tried to assuage this by appearing confident and assured, although even within himself, he knew that this was one operation, the outcome of which was beyond his power to predict. He could only pray for the best. The fast approaching hour of the attack on the formidable fortress was now slowly casting its shadow on this intrepid group of men. Colonel Holt faced Ernesto, shook hands, and nodded. "Captain Duran, proceed." Ernesto saluted the colonel, and in that brief moment when their eyes met, a common feeling of mutual concern over the other flashed between them. The signal was given, and each officer led his men, except for Dizon, who stayed behind, hoping to provoke Ernesto into allowing him to join Lieutenant Toribio's at the garrison gate instead of rejoining Colonel Holt. Ernesto was determined to prevent Dizon jeopardizing this operation, that he intentionally altered Colonel Holt's assignment for Dizon. He was aware of his insubordination, but he was prepared to face the consequences for his decision. "Your men are waiting, Lieutenant Dizon. Proceed to your assignment." "That's an order." Ernesto could not be dissuaded. His gut confirmed that Dizon was a threat. Dizon executed a mock salute, turned and strode away in a huff to the direction of Colonel Holt's position. He could not do anything now, not just yet anyway. "Mauro, keep an eye on him. He is not to be anywhere near the garrison gate at all costs." Ernesto spoke to the stocky guerrilla in a low yet authoritative tone. "Yes, sir." The order puzzled him, but he promptly followed Dizon. As soon as Ernesto and his men left, Colonel Holt hurriedly went back to his radio man, Lieutenant Joe Fern, and resumed his communication with General MacArthur's forces and reported the progress of their operation before the final assault to clear the way for the landing forces on the pitches of Lingayen. "All right, men, listen up to your instructions carefully." Ernesto gave the final briefing to his men once they were by themselves. "We are here to penetrate the fortress through the tunnel below the church." The gasp reaction was to be expected. This was the first time that the men were informed about their engagement. "The tunnel ends at the armory. Arm yourself as much as you can handle, and proceed up the church and into every nook and cranny of that fortress, as quietly and stealthily as situation dictates." Dumbfounded was not enough to describe the men's faces. It was beyond stunned, and then some. "As soon as I receive the signal, I will cut through that clearing between here and where the light will appear at the entrance of the tunnel. Once I reach the tunnel, a lamp will be waved for you to follow. Remember, if at that time The searchlight had not yet been disabled. Proceed with caution. However, once Sergeant Leon's men have taken out the tower guards, move on fast. Cardo, you follow after me with the torches. Yes, sir, was a simultaneous response. Good luck. Mr. Miura reached the entrance of the tunnel. He waved his lamp 3 times, left another lighted lamp, and raced back in, hoping that the guards have not attempted to open the door and discovered the tunnel. From about 100 yards away, Ernesto saw a light flicker 3 times. That's our signalman, remember, one at a time. Avoid the searchlight and stay as low as you can. When we get to the armory, arm yourselves to the hilt. Ernesto crawled to the field, and as the searchlight rolled past his path, he stood up and dashed to the entrance of the tunnel. Cardo arrived next, lighted the torches, and followed Ernesto through the tunnel, leaving the torches at short intervals. One after another, the men carefully avoided the path of the searchlight, aware that one mistake by any of them would jeopardize their operation. Outside the fortress wall, 3 of Sergeant Leon's men were crouched low under the brush. They both aimed their bows at the tower guard and at the searchlight. Simultaneously, they released their arrows and each hit its target. The guard tumbled down from the tower without a whimper, just a hollow thud on the ground. The searchlight blacked out. Ernesto's men darted in droves toward the tunnel. He had a last-minute reminder for Sergeant Leon, who was in charge with leading all the men after him and sending a signal for Colonel Holt to follow. At the agreed time, concurrently, as the arrows got the tower guard and the searchlight, Sergeant Manuel's men arrow hit their marks at every gun emplacement above the fortress wall, including the artillery and cannons fronting the sea. Sergeant Cross and his men have simultaneously silenced the guards at every checkpoint. They executed their order as quietly and as clearly as the arrow flew and hit their targets, eliminating any resistance and sound that could have alerted the Japanese forces at the fortress. All machine guns at every checkpoint had been taken over by the guerrillas and directed to the Japanese barracks at the municipal government building and the 2 school buildings. Bows and arrows were used as well at the guards. They were ready to stop any enemy reinforcement. The rest of the group Sergeant Cruz had deployed around the market structure, where they found 2 guards at the gate and 4 more around its perimeter. At the signal, they took out the entire sentry with their arrows. Men, move as briefly and as fast as you can. Remember, take as many ammo as you can carry when we reach the armory. Sergeant Leon had discharged his duty. Let's go. The men followed him, guided by the torches, through the tunnel. After the agreed time interval, one of Sergeant Leon's men sent the signal for Colonel Holt and his men. With the searchlight disabled, Colonel Holt and his men covered the distance to the tunnel in record time. The synchronized timing and execution of each team's assignment worked out perfectly as planned, without any loss of life. Lieutenant Toribio's unit was as well at its position, some 20 yards from the garrison main gate, undetected. His men were all crouched flat on the ground, waiting for the signal. The first group, with the bows and arrows, were already in the firing position. He raised his hand and gave the signal. Arrows whizzed through the air, landing on their targets, the guards at the southern watchtowers and gun emplacements. Eerie silence filled the night as their bodies plunged down to the ground. The searchlights abruptly stopped midway their sweeping paths. After Dison had deployed half of his men instead of following his order to rejoin Colonel Holt, he evaded Mauro and bludgeoned him when the latter tried to block his way. He scurried away then took a fast detour for the garrison gate, crazed by his desire to warn Colonel Hiroshi and be greatly rewarded. He defied his order and was prepared to take every risk necessary. At the same instant, the 2 guards just outside the main gate of the garrison were silenced by the arrows. When they fell back, the guards inside the guardhouse stepped out to check with arms drawn. Lieutenant Toribio was about to give his men the order to advance when they saw Lieutenant Dison sprint the distance between them and the garrison. It was too late to stop him, for he went straight toward the partly open gate, where he came face to face with the guard's rifle aimed straight at him. Lieutenant Torrebio's men released an arrow, and the guard fell. Dizon had just barely enough time to look back at his savior and back at his attacker when Sergeant Hiroto materialized from a distance. "Don't shoot, Lieutenant Dizon here," Dizon yelled in Japanese, flagging down Hiroto. "I have come to warn you," he panted, but Sergeant Hiroto's long-suppressed hate for spies was evident all over his face. "Traitor, double-faced spy," Hiroto shrieked and fired at Dizon, who was stunned. "Fire!" He screeched at the soldier manning the machine gun at the gate when he saw the stampede of Lieutenant Toribio's men rapidly advancing toward the gate. An unexpected turn of events struck Dizon with instant clarity that he would always be a Filipino to the eyes of the enemies. The reaction from Hiroto proved that. Swiftly, Dizon drew his pistol and shot the soldier behind the machine gun before he could follow Hiroto's order. His next target was Hiroto himself. The first shot that Dizon's action triggered foiled the seamlessly executed surprise attack of the guerrillas. Now totally unhinged and fired up with rage and frustration, Dizon dived into the sandbags, pushed aside the dead guard, and turned the machine gun toward the half-asleep and bewildered Japanese soldiers scampering out of their barracks in their underwear. The fusillades from Dizon's machine gun cut them down before they fully realized that the firing came from their own weapon. This threw them into complete confusion and chaos. Colonel Hiroshi, who had been awake all night, perusing over his strategy and their planned raid of the guerrilla camp that morning, was jolted by the volley of shots. Throwing his pistol, he hastened to the window and was flabbergasted by the sight that greeted him. In spite of the distance of the main gate, he readily identified the man behind the machine gun. His jaw stiffened. It was his own spy, Lieutenant Dizon, the man he trained, the man he trusted. With fury in his eyes, he aimed his pistol and pulled the trigger. His marksmanship was once more did not fail him, for Lieutenant Dizon staggered from just one bullet, and he slammed against the machine gun. "To the armory!" Colonel Hiroshi's voice boomed over the din of the confusion below his window. His soldiers disorganized and ran in panic into the grounds. Officers from the quarters of the rectory sprang out, tittering into their uniform and bellowing out orders to their men. "Man your stations, hold your ground, to the armory," but they were too distant to hear. Soldiers were scrambling into the church for the armory. From his vantage point, Colonel Hiroshi witnessed his officers galloping out into the grounds to execute some order to their men who had deployed in disorganized directions. The siren was blowing throughout the fortress, and the grounds steaming with the Japanese soldiers, armed with only what they had in their sleeping quarters. Lieutenant Torrebio's men have penetrating the gate, more armed than their enemies. As the gunshots at the bastion was heard, Lieutenant Cruz gave the signal for the use of hand grenades. Simultaneously, hand grenades were thrown into the Japanese barracks. A barrage of explosions rocked the town. At the armory, Mr. Miura was still alone, for the group of Captain Duran was still negotiating the long tunnel. With the entire garrison prematurely alerted by Lieutenant Dizon's act, the operation had lost its element of surprise. Alone and unprepared for the unexpected disruption, Mr. Miura waited anxiously as the double door to the armory were being forced open by a mob of hands, pounding, breaking, pushing. The crates of bullets at both ends of the two doors crumpled and forced out. The rifles cracked. The doors creaked against the rails. Mr. Miura was petrified in place. What now? This was not what he volunteered for, not the actual fighting. He was hoping that after he had done his part, and upon the arrival of Ernesto and his group, he would walk away and out from the chaos of this encounter. Mission accomplished. Complete and smooth takeover. No shooting, no killing. That's what he offered to do. But he had to hold the armory for the guerrillas. He had to, otherwise, what was Joybell's death for? He had to hold fort or it would be the total annihilation. of the guerrillas if the doors opened and the Japanese got their hands to the limitless supplies of arms and ammunition. A massacre. The huge doors were budging, the pounding and the heaving of the post deafening, the stampede of running feet rumbling from the distance. He was caught between two factions, both his brothers and his countrymen. This was madness, a total catastrophe. Then the doors flung open, and as hundreds of fiery eyes loomed toward him, Mr. Miura went for the machine gun and manned it without a second to think. The rapid fire rattled and echoed. Screams mingled with the groans and moans and falling bodies, piled one on top of the other as the bullets swept through the rushing Japanese soldiers, like rice stalks rampaged by the wind and flattened. Mr. Miura could not stop firing, his fingers stuck in place, his eyes glued to the blurring of bodies. The Japanese would race down before they could get anywhere near the armory door. His mind raced wildly. The guerrillas must be on their way. They have to be. Then he would be through with this madness, this craziness, this killing. Suddenly he felt his body stiffen with one, two, then three burning leads. He staggered back, but he held on to the machine gun and just kept firing. From the opening where the marble slab once was, Captain Ernesto Duran emerged, and his men trailed behind him like a line of disciplined soldier ants. The sight of the superior firepower now available before them was like a burst of adrenaline that shot up into their veins. There was no holding them back. Starved for so long, they rushed to the bounty of arms and ammo and grabbed everything they could carry. Now they were ready for their enemies. The real encounter has just begun. Captain Duran's men were relentless as they mowed down the incoming unarmed Japanese. The table had been turned. Japanese soldiers were rushing in and falling in front and over Mr. Miura, and guerrillas foosing from behind him. The stampede of running feet of eager men rushed in from behind, men scampering all over the armory and frantically getting to the arms and the ammo, mowing down the Japanese who were desperately wrestling for their armory. The fighting turned into a frenzied hand-to-hand combat, but the greatly boasted morale of the guerrillas was unstoppable, a mix of foes against the foes, grabbing from one another what had now become the very contention of the encounter. When Colonel Holt and his men poured in from the tunnel, Captain Duran's men have overpowered the enemies and taken over the armory, providing Colonel Holt's men an easy access to all the arms and ammo they needed. Before proceeding upstairs into the church, Duran caught the nod of gratitude and acknowledgement of the colonel. Yes, he was wrong for questioning Captain Duran and for doubting the loyalty and promise of his Japanese friend, Mr. Miura. In the midst of the chaos, no one noticed the absence or whereabouts of Mr. Miura, not Captain Ernesto Duran, nor Colonel Holt. But from their belief, from their brief exchange of looks, they both knew that they thought of him. They acknowledged him. They were grateful to him. There was no need for more words. Mr. Miura was their hero. That's all for today, to be continued on Tuesdays and Thursdays. May we all forever exhale and inhale love and peace. Thanks for being with me today. I hope you will inspire me with a like, share, and subscribe.